On a snowy Christmas Eve, a lonely old man stepped into a small cafe just to warm up, but what he found inside would reignite everything he'd forgotten about life, love, and purpose. Days later, when powerful executives tried to shut that cafe down for being too kind, he did something no one saw coming. Before we go back, tell me where you're watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story will melt your heart. The snow fell thick and quiet over the city that Christmas Eve, blanketing the streets in white silence. Most shops had long since closed, their windows dark except for the occasional string of colored lights left burning through the night. But on the corner of Maple and 3rd, one small cafe still glowed warm against the cold. Harrison's Café, its windows fogged with heat, golden light spilling onto the snow-covered sidewalk. Robert Harrison stood across the street for a moment, collar turned up against the wind, watching the cafe through the falling snow. He was 78 years old, with silver hair that stuck out from under his wool cap and deep lines around his eyes that came from decades of both worry and laughter. To anyone passing by, he was just another old man seeking warmth on a bitter night. No one would guess that he'd built this place and 42 others like it from nothing. He crossed the street slowly, his boots crunching in the fresh snow, and pushed open the door. The warmth hit him first, and then the smell: coffee and cinnamon, butter and vanilla. A small bell chimed above the door. The cafe was half full, maybe 20 people scattered across the worn wooden tables. In the corner, a young couple shared a piece of pie. Near the window, an elderly woman sat alone with a book. At the counter, a man in a threadbare coat nursed a cup of coffee, his hands wrapped around it for warmth. Evening, came a voice, bright and welcoming. "Cold enough for you out there?" Robert looked up to see a woman in her late 30s, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, approaching with a menu and a smile that reached her eyes. Her name tag read Joyce, manager. "Cold enough," Robert agreed, his voice gravelly. "Just a coffee if that's all right." "More than all right, that's what we're here for." Joyce led him to a table by the window, the one with the best view of the street. "Regular or decaf?" "Regular. At my age, sleep's overrated anyway." Joyce laughed, a real laugh, not the customer service kind. "I'll bring you something special. You look like you could use it." As she walked away, Robert settled into the chair and looked around. The cafe had changed very little in the 15 years since he'd stepped back from day-to-day operations. The same Edison bulbs hung from the ceiling. The same mismatched chairs surrounded tables that had been refinished so many times they'd taken on a character of their own. The walls were covered with community notices: lost cats, guitar lessons, a hand-drawn poster for a church choir looking for members. And there near the door, something new, a small chalkboard that read "Pay it forward, buy a coffee for someone who needs it." Below it, a cluster of paper coffee cups hung on strings, each one representing a prepaid drink for anyone who couldn't afford one. Robert felt something tighten in his chest. Joyce returned with his coffee and a slice of apple pie he hadn't ordered. "On the house," she said, setting it down. "Anyone spending Christmas Eve alone in a cafe deserves pie." "I'm not alone," Robert said quietly, looking around at the other customers. "Plenty of people here." Joyce followed his gaze and smiled. "You know what? You're right." She pulled out the chair across from him. "Mind if I sit for a minute? It's been a long shift, please." She sat with a grateful sigh, cradling her own mug of coffee. "So what brings you out tonight?" "Family, all busy." Robert took a sip of his coffee. It was perfect, rich and hot without being bitter. "My wife passed away 3 years ago. No children. I suppose I just wanted to be somewhere that felt alive." Joyce's expression softened. "I'm sorry about your wife, but I'm glad you came here." She gestured around the cafe. "We try to keep it open on holidays. Someone should be here for the people who need a place to go." "That's kind of you." "It's not kindness," Joyce said. "It's just right, you know. My husband died 5 years ago. I know what it's like to have nowhere to be on Christmas. This place saved me that first year." She looked down at her coffee. "So now I try to save other people, I guess." Before Robert could respond, a young man appeared from behind the counter, early 20s, with tired eyes but quick hands. His name tag read Tom. "Joyce, we're getting low on whipped cream, and that family in the back just asked for 5 hot chocolates. I'll get more from storage. Can you check on table 7? I think they've been waiting a while." "On it." Tom moved off with practiced efficiency. Joyce stood. "Sorry, duty calls, but enjoy the pie, okay?" "And if you need anything, I'll wave," Robert said. "Thank you." She squeezed his shoulder as she passed, a small gesture that felt enormous in its genuine warmth. Robert ate his pie slowly, savoring each bite. The apples were soft and sweet, the crust buttery and flaked just right. Through the window he watched the snow continue to fall, covering the city in clean white silence. Inside the cafe hummed with quiet life, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clink of spoons on saucers, the low murmur of conversation. At the table next to him a woman was reading to a small child from a worn picture book. The child's eyes were heavy with sleep, but they fought to stay awake, drawn in by the story. At the counter, an older man, possibly homeless, judging by the 3 layers of coats, was working through a bowl of soup, eating slowly as if to make it last. Betty, the older waitress with kind eyes and quick movements, was refilling the homeless man's coffee without being asked. She leaned in and said something that made him smile. This, Robert thought, this is what it was supposed to be. 50 years ago, when he and his late wife Eleanor had opened the first Harrison's Café, they'd had a simple philosophy: make good food, charge fair prices, and treat everyone like family. The cafe had been Eleanor's dream, really. She'd grown up poor, the daughter of factory workers, and she'd never forgotten what it felt like to stand outside a fancy restaurant, looking in at a world she couldn't afford. "Nobody should feel like they don't belong," she'd said. "Not in our place." And for 30 years that's what they'd built, a place where everyone belonged. The business had grown, multiplied, spread across the state, but as Robert had gotten older and eventually stepped back, a new management team had taken over. Young, ambitious people with MBAs and market research and strategies for brand positioning. They were good at what they did. Profits were up, the company was expanding faster than ever, but something had been lost in translation. Robert was pulled from his thoughts by a sudden flicker, once, twice, and then the lights went out completely. The cafe fell into darkness, broken only by the ambient glow of the snowy street outside. For a moment there was silence. Then a child's voice. "Mommy, what happened?" "Just a power outage, sweetie. It's okay." Joyce's voice cut through the darkness, calm and clear. "Everyone stay seated, please. We've got this. Tom, can you grab the emergency candles from the back? Already on it." Within minutes, tea lights and pillar candles began appearing on every table, transforming the cafe into something that looked almost medieval, flickering shadows on the walls, faces half-lit and mysterious in the golden glow. The espresso machine was dead, but Joyce moved behind the counter anyway, pulling out a camping stove that she must have kept for exactly this kind of emergency. "We can still heat water," she announced. "So tea, hot chocolate, and instant coffee are still on the menu, and the pie's still good." This got a few laughs. Betty was already moving through the cafe, distributing candles and blankets, actual blankets that appeared to have been stored somewhere in the back. "Where did those come from?" someone asked. "Joyce keeps them for winter," Betty said. "Never know when someone might need one." Robert watched, transfixed, as the cafe adapted. Far from panicking or shutting down, the place seemed to come even more alive. Tom emerged from the back with an old acoustic guitar. "Anyone mind some music?" he called out. "Play Silent Night," someone suggested. Tom sat on a stool near the counter and began to play. His voice was untrained but sincere, and within moments, others were joining in. Even the homeless man at the counter, his voice surprisingly strong and clear. "Silent Night, Holy Night." Robert felt his throat tighten. He couldn't remember the last time he'd sung this song, maybe at Eleanor's funeral when they'd played her favorite hymns. She would have loved this moment, he thought. This exact moment with the candles and the singing and the pure, simple human warmth. A gust of wind rattled the windows and Joyce looked toward the door. Through the glass a figure was visible on the street, a woman, hunched against the cold, clearly homeless, hovering just outside the cafe's warmth. Without hesitation, Joyce moved to the door and opened it. Cold air rushed in. "Ma'am, would you like to come inside?" The woman looked up, surprised. She was perhaps 50, with weathered skin and eyes that had seen too much. "I don't have any money." "That's okay. Come in out of the cold, please." The woman hesitated, then stepped inside. Joyce guided her to an empty seat near the small electric heater that was running on battery backup. Within minutes, Betty had brought her hot chocolate and a sandwich. "Thank you," the woman whispered, tears in her eyes. "Thank you so much." Joyce knelt beside her chair. "No one should be alone tonight," she said softly. Merry Christmas. Robert stood up. He couldn't just sit there anymore. Moving to the counter, he caught Joyce's attention. What can I do to help? She looked surprised. You don't have to. I want to. She studied him for a moment, then smiled. Okay, can you help Tom hand out these blankets? And there's some extra food in the back, sandwiches we made for tomorrow. We should probably share them while they're fresh. For the next hour, Robert worked alongside the staff, distributing food and blankets, refilling water glasses, even washing dishes by candlelight in the back. The cafe had transformed from a business into something else entirely, a refuge, a community center, a reminder that people could still take care of each other. More people had come in from the cold, not customers, exactly, but people who needed shelter. Joyce turned no one away. Tom played song after song. Someone started telling stories, and soon everyone was sharing memories of past Christmases, funny anecdotes, even a few jokes that made the whole room laugh. At one point, Robert found himself standing next to Betty, both of them watching the scene unfold. This is special, Betty said quietly. This is what it's all about, you know. Not the fancy decorations, or the expensive gifts. Just this, people being kind to each other. How long have you worked here? Robert asked. 12 years, best job I ever had. She looked at him. Joyce is something special. She could make more money somewhere else, but she stays because she cares about this place, about the people. That's rare, rarer every day, Betty agreed. Around midnight, the power flickered back on. The sudden brightness was almost jarring after so long in candlelight. But instead of celebration, there was an almost disappointed sigh. It was prettier with candles, a child said, and everyone laughed. Joyce stood in the middle of the cafe and raised her hands. Thank you all for being here tonight, for sharing this with us. This is what makes it all worthwhile. Her voice caught slightly. This is what Christmas is supposed to feel like. There was applause, genuine heartfelt applause. As people began to gather their things, Robert approached the counter. He pulled out his wallet and left three $50 bills under his coffee cup, tucked out of sight. Joyce caught his arm as he was putting on his coat. You don't have to. I want to, he said simply. Thank you for tonight. For remembering what matters. She looked at him curiously. You talk like you've seen it forgotten. I have. Too many times. He buttoned his coat. But not here, not tonight. As he walked to the door, he passed the chalkboard with the pay it forward cups. He added another 50 to the jar beside it, enough to cover 20 coffees. The cold hit him as he stepped outside, but he didn't mind. The snow had stopped, and the sky was starting to clear, stars visible through the gaps in the clouds. He walked slowly down the street, his breath misting in the air. Behind him, Harrison's cafe glowed warm in the winter night, a small beacon of kindness in a cold world. It was only later, when Joyce was cleaning up and found the money under the coffee cup, that she discovered the small note written on a napkin. Kindness never costs too much. Keep the lights on. She held it for a long moment, then carefully folded it and put it in her pocket, next to her heart. Robert returned to the cafe 3 days later, then again the day after that. Within 2 weeks, he'd become a regular fixture, the quiet old man who always sat at the corner table, nursing his coffee and watching the world go by. No one questioned it. Regulars were common at Harrison's, and Robert fit right in. He was polite, tipped well, and never caused any trouble. Joyce would always greet him with a smile and a fresh cup of coffee, and they'd chat briefly about the weather or the neighborhood before she moved on to other customers. What no one knew was that Robert was studying the cafe with the intensity of a detective. He watched everything. He saw how Tom would stay late without being asked when Joyce was overwhelmed, how he'd slip extra whipped cream onto hot chocolates for kids, how he'd patiently explain the difference between a latte and a cappuccino to confused customers for the 100th time. He noticed that Tom arrived every morning with dark circles under his eyes, and overheard him on the phone one day talking to someone about his mother's medical bills. He saw how Betty knew every regular by name and remembered their orders, their kids' names, their struggles, how she'd slip an extra cookie into a bag for the construction worker who came in every morning at 5 a.m., how she'd sit with lonely elderly customers and let them talk, really talk, without rushing them along. He watched her comfort a young woman who just lost her job, pressing a $20 bill into her hand when she thought no one was looking. and he saw Joyce, how she ran the place with a perfect balance of efficiency and warmth, how she'd quietly comp meals for people who were obviously struggling, how she kept a box behind the counter filled with scarves and gloves for anyone who needed them, how she'd started a tradition of leaving containers of food scraps outside the back door for the stray cats and dogs in the neighborhood. "They're hungry too," she'd explained to Tom when he'd asked about it. "We throw away so much food that's still perfectly good. So now we partner with the Maple Street Shelter and a local rescue group. They pick it up every night before it expires. That way it's safe, legal, and still helps people and animals who need it." Robert watched as this simple act had evolved into something more organized. Now there were designated containers, one for cats, one for dogs, and Joyce had even contacted a local animal rescue to help trap, spay and release the strays. A bulletin board near the back had photos of animals that had been adopted through the cafe's informal network. One evening, Robert watched as a well-dressed woman in her 40s left a $20 bill with Joyce and said, "That's for whoever needs it, for their coffee or meal or whatever." After the woman left, Joyce added the 20 to a jar behind the counter labeled Community Fund. Robert learned that this was a regular occurrence, customers paying forward meals, leaving extra tips to be redistributed, contributing to a collective pot that Joyce used to help people who came in hungry or cold. "We're not a charity," Joyce had explained to a new employee Robert overheard. "We're a business, but we're also a community space. If someone needs help, and we can provide it without going under, why wouldn't we?" Robert began keeping notes in a small leather journal. He tracked customer retention rates, average transaction values, peak hours, and most importantly, the intangible metrics: how many regulars came in daily, how many people lingered to talk with staff, how many strangers became friends over shared tables. The numbers told a story that warmed his heart. This location had a 94% customer retention rate. The average customer visited 4.3 times per week. Review scores averaged 4.9 stars across all platforms. And the comments were what mattered most. "This place feels like home. The staff actually remembers my name. I was having the worst day and the manager noticed and just listened. Didn't try to fix it, just listened. They helped me when I had nothing. Now I'm back on my feet and I come here every day to pay it forward." This was it, Robert realized. This was what he and Eleanor had dreamed of, what they'd built in the early days before committees and market research and brand strategies. This was the soul of Harrison's Café, still alive and beating in this one small location. But how many other locations had lost it? Robert began visiting other Harrison's cafes across the city, always in his disguise as just another elderly customer. What he found troubled him deeply. The newer locations were cleaner, more modern, more profitable, and completely soulless. The staff were efficient but distant, trained to execute transactions rather than build relationships. The decor was stylish but sterile, all matching furniture, carefully curated art, mood lighting designed by consultants. The menus had been elevated to include artisanal this and handcrafted that, with prices to match. A simple coffee that cost $3 at Maple Street was $5.50 downtown. The community boards were gone, replaced with carefully curated art pieces that said nothing. The Pay It Forward programs had been discontinued as off-brand. The mismatched chairs had been replaced with uniform seating. Even the music was controlled by corporate. The same playlist in every location, optimized through focus groups. At one location in the business district, Robert watched as staff turned away a homeless man who'd simply wanted to sit out of the cold, even though the cafe was nearly empty. "Company policy," the manager had said, not unkindly but firmly. "We can't have non-paying customers taking up space. It affects the ambiance." Robert had left without ordering, his coffee sitting untouched on the counter. At another location, he overheard a server being reprimanded for spending too long talking to an elderly customer. "Your job is to serve efficiently and move on," the shift supervisor said. "We have table turn rates to maintain." Robert made detailed notes of everything he observed. The picture was becoming clear and deeply troubling. He started attending the quarterly board meetings again, something he hadn't done in nearly 5 years. As founder and majority shareholder, he still had a seat, but he'd largely abdicated involvement, trusting the new leadership to maintain the company's values while pursuing growth. That trust, he now realized, had been misplaced. At a quarterly review meeting in late January, he sat in the back of the conference room and listened to the new executive team present their brand evolution strategy. Harrison's is moving up market, announced Sharon Reeves, the 42-year-old CEO who'd taken over 3 years ago. She was sharp, competent, and genuinely talented, but she'd never worked in a restaurant before Harrison's. Her background was in luxury retail. We're competing with premium coffee chains now. Our customer demographic is shifting toward young professionals with disposable income. To do that, we need to position ourselves as premium, not pedestrian. The slides showed glossy photos of remodeled cafes, sophisticated menu items, and demographic data. Profit margins were up 23% in locations that had implemented the new strategy. Same-store sales were up 18%. The stock price had nearly doubled. What about the community aspect? Robert had asked quietly from the back of the room. The programs that made Harrison's a gathering place. Sharon had smiled, politely but dismissively. Those programs were valuable in their time, Mr. Harrison, and we appreciate the foundation you built. But markets evolve, customer expectations evolve, we have to evolve too, or we become irrelevant, added Charles Mitchell, the 52-year-old regional director, who'd been instrumental in implementing the new strategy. Mitchell was former military, efficient and disciplined. He ran his region like a well-oiled machine. The soft stuff, the charity aspects, the pay-it-forward boards, the casual atmosphere, it doesn't align with where we're going. It actually works against us. High-end customers don't want to sit next to homeless people or have their coffee subsidize someone else's meal. But those high-end customers aren't loyal, Robert had pointed out. They'll go wherever is trendy next month. The customers who actually build a business are the ones who feel connected to it. With respect, Mr. Harrison, Sharon said, her tone gentle but firm, loyalty metrics show strong performance in our renovated locations. Mobile app usage is up, rewards program enrollment is up, social media engagement is up. Those aren't loyalty, Robert said. Those are transactions. The room had gone quiet. Sharon exchanged glances with Mitchell. Mr. Harrison, she said carefully, I know change is difficult, especially when it involves something you built. But the data supports our strategy. We're not destroying Harrison's, we're evolving it. Robert had said nothing more. What could he say? The numbers supported them. The strategy was working, but was it? He thought about Joyce's Café, still clinging to the old ways. It was profitable, not spectacularly, but steadily. More importantly, it was loved. People came there not just for coffee but for connection, for community, for a sense of belonging. Wasn't that worth something? Wasn't that worth protecting? One Tuesday afternoon in early February, Robert was at his usual table at Maple Street when Charles Mitchell himself walked into Joyce's Café. Robert recognized him immediately but sank lower in his seat, letting his newspaper shield his face. Mitchell looked around with the critical eye of an inspector. He checked the bathroom, examined the menu, ran a finger along a windowsill to check for dust. He photographed the community board, the pay-it-forward display, the somewhat worn furniture. Joyce approached him with her usual warmth. Can I help you? I'm Charles Mitchell, Regional Director. I should have called ahead, but I wanted to see the location in its natural state. Joyce's smile didn't falter, but Robert saw her shoulders tighten slightly. Of course, welcome. Can I get you something to drink? Just water, thanks. For the next hour, Mitchell made notes on a tablet while observing the cafe. Robert watched him watch the place, saw the disapproval forming in the tightening of his jaw, the way he shook his head almost imperceptibly at certain things. When the homeless woman from Christmas Eve came in and Betty immediately poured her a coffee and slid over a muffin without payment, Mitchell's frown deepened. He made a note on his tablet. When a customer pointed at the pay-it-forward board and asked to add 5 coffees, Mitchell actually sighed audibly. Another note. When Tom spent 10 minutes helping an elderly man understand how to order through the mobile app, explaining each step with patience, Mitchell looked at his watch pointedly. More notes. Finally, he called Joyce over to his table. Robert strained to hear their conversation. Miss Martinez, can you explain these programs to me? The pay-it-forward system, the free food for people who can't pay, he gestured vaguely toward where Betty was refilling the homeless woman's coffee again, the tolerance for non-paying customers. Their community outreach initiatives, Joyce said carefully. They build customer loyalty and strengthen our connection to the neighborhood. We've found they undermine brand positioning," Mitchell interrupted, his tone not unkind but immovable. "Harrison's is moving toward a premium market position. These kinds of programs make us look like a charity operation. They cheapen the brand image we're trying to cultivate. With respect, Mr. Mitchell, these programs are why our customer retention is so high. People come here because they feel valued, because they know we care about more than just people come here because it's cheap and easy," Mitchell said bluntly. "That's not the customer base we want anymore. We want customers who will pay $7 for a specialty latte without blinking, not people looking for handouts." Joyce's face flushed. "These aren't handouts. They're investments in community, and our margins are good. We're profitable." "Barely, and profitability isn't the only metric. There's brand image to consider. When corporate sends photographers for our marketing materials, they can't use images from this location because the aesthetic is wrong. Too cluttered, too poor looking." He gestured at the community board covered in handmade flyers. "This doesn't say premium coffee experience. It says small town diner. It says community," Joyce countered, her voice strained but controlled. "It says people matter here. It looks dated and off-brand." Mitchell closed his tablet and stood up. "I'm recommending significant changes to this location. New decor aligned with corporate standards, updated menu with higher price points, and discontinuation of all these charity-adjacent programs. You'll receive the formal memo by the end of the week and you'll have 60 days to implement. And if I don't," Mitchell looked at her steadily, "then we'll need to discuss whether this location should remain open at all. The property is quite valuable, prime corner location in a gentrifying neighborhood. We could sell it or lease it to a franchise operator who's more aligned with company vision. You can't just close us down. Our numbers are solid, your numbers are adequate, but this is about more than numbers. It's about brand consistency. Every Harrison's location needs to reflect our values: efficiency, quality, premium positioning. This location reflects old values that no longer serve our strategy." He picked up his briefcase. 60 days, Miss Martinez. Make the changes or we'll make them for you." He left without another word, without a goodbye, without even paying for his water. Joyce stood frozen for a moment, staring at the door. Then slowly, mechanically, she returned to the counter. Robert saw her hands shake as she poured herself coffee she wouldn't drink. Betty came up beside her, concerned. "You okay, Ann? He wants to close us down, or change everything that makes us." Joyce's voice was barely above a whisper. "Can he do that? He's regional director. He reports directly to the CEO. If they want us gone, we're gone." Tom emerged from the back, picking up on the tension immediately. "What happened?" "Corporate wants to kill the cafe," Betty said bluntly. "Turn it into another cookie-cutter location." "They can't." Tom started, then stopped. "Can they?" "They own it," Joyce said. "We just work here." Robert set down his newspaper. His hands were steady now, his mind clear. This was it, the moment he'd been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. The moment when he'd have to decide whether to step back and let the company continue on its current path, or step forward and fight for the soul of what he'd built. Eleanor's voice echoed in his memory, as clear as if she were standing beside him. "If you build something good, Robert, you have to protect it. Not just create it, protect it. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." He stood slowly, left money on the table, more than enough to cover his coffee, and tipped generously, and walked out into the cold afternoon air. His phone was in his hand before he reached his car. It was time to make some calls. It was time to remind them who really owned Harrison's Café. It was time to fight. The quarterly board meeting was held on a gray February morning in the company headquarters downtown, a sleek modern building that Robert barely recognized. The Harrison's Café logo was etched into the glass doors, but it had been redesigned into something sharp and minimalist, all the warmth stripped away. Robert arrived early, dressed not in his usual casual wear but in a suit Eleanor had bought him years ago. It still fit, if a bit loose. His cane was polished wood with a silver handle, the one Eleanor had given him on their 40th anniversary. He'd barely used it since her death, preferring a simpler one, but today he wanted the reminder of her strength. The receptionist looked surprised to see him. "Mr. Harrison, we weren't expecting." "I'm still on the board," Robert said mildly. "I'm allowed to attend meetings." "Is the conference room ready?" "Of course, I'll let them know you're here." "Don't." Robert held up a hand. "I'd like to surprise them." The conference room was on the top floor, all glass walls and expensive furniture with a view of the city skyline. The leadership team was already assembling. Sharon Reeves, Charles Mitchell, Marcus Chen the CFO, Diana Torres the marketing director, several regional managers. They were laughing about something, relaxed and confident. They looked up in surprise when Robert walked in, leaning on his cane. "Robert," Sharon said, standing quickly. "This is unexpected. We'd heard you were taking it easy." "I'm old, not dead," Robert said. He moved to the head of the table, his seat, the founder's seat, and slowly lowered himself into it. "I thought I'd sit in, if that's all right." "Of course. You're always welcome." Sharon's smile was genuine but wary. She exchanged quick glances with Mitchell. The meeting began with the usual reports, financial updates, expansion plans, marketing campaigns. Robert listened quietly, noting the emphasis on growth, on premium positioning, on elevating the brand experience. Marcus Chen presented financial results that were genuinely impressive. Revenue up 31% year-over-year. EBITDA margins improved to 18%. Stock price at an all-time high. "We're outperforming the entire category," Marcus said proudly. "Our growth trajectory puts us on track to double our footprint in 3 years." Diana Torres presented the marketing strategy, sleek campaigns featuring young professionals in stylish settings, emphasizing words like artisanal, curated and elevated. The tagline had changed from "where everyone belongs" to "crafted for those who know quality." "We're seeing tremendous engagement with our target demographic," Diana reported. "Instagram followers up 340%. Our influencer partnerships are generating significant buzz. Harrison's is finally being recognized as a premium brand." Then Charles Mitchell stood to present his regional report. "We've successfully converted 17 locations to the new format," he began, clicking through slides showing renovated cafes, clean lines, modern art, uniform furniture, strategic lighting. They looked expensive. They looked empty of personality. Customer spend per visit is up 34% in converted locations. We're successfully attracting a higher income demographic. However, we have a few legacy locations that are resisting the transition. A photo of Joyce's cafe appeared on screen. Robert's cafe, his and Eleanor's. "This location on Maple Street represents everything we're trying to move away from," Mitchell continued. His tone was clinical, detached. "It's cluttered with community notices and handmade signage. The decor is outdated and inconsistent with brand standards, and the management has implemented several programs that actively work against our brand positioning." He clicked through photos Robert recognized with painful clarity: the Pay It Forward board with its paper coffee cups, the community bulletin board covered in hand-drawn flyers, the mismatched furniture that had been refinished lovingly over years, a photo of Betty serving coffee to the homeless woman, another of Tom sitting with an elderly customer patiently explaining something. "These kinds of scenes don't align with the premium experience we're trying to create," Mitchell said. "If potential customers see one Harrison's operating like a community center or soup kitchen, they'll assume all our locations are the same. It dilutes the brand we're building." He clicked to a slide titled Proposed Actions. "I'm recommending we either force a complete renovation and management change at this location, or close it entirely and sell the property. The real estate value alone would generate significant return. We estimate $2.3 million from the sale." "What's the financial performance of this location?" asked Marcus. "Profitable but below average compared to converted locations." Mitchell pulled up a comparison chart. "Average transaction value is 41% lower. Profit margin is 6.2% compared to 11.8% at our top-performing renovated locations." "But total revenue?" Robert asked quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Mitchell frowned. "Total revenue is adequate, not exceptional." "What's the exact number?" Mitchell tapped his tablet. "Annual revenue of $890,000, and your top-performing renovated location. The downtown location does $1.1 million annually." "With how much foot traffic?" Mitchell hesitated. "Approximately 180 customers per day. And Maple Street?" Another pause. "About 245 customers per day. So Maple Street serves 36% more customers but generates 19% less revenue." Robert let that hang in the air. "Why is that?" "Lower prices, lower average transaction value. Too much generosity." Or Robert said, "You could say Maple Street serves significantly more people from the community while still remaining profitable." "That sounds like success to me," Sharon interjected smoothly. Mr. Harrison, I understand your perspective, but we have to look at optimization. If that location served the same customer count at our premium price point, revenue would increase dramatically. Or customer count would drop dramatically, Robert countered. Has anyone studied that? Silence. I have, Robert said. He pulled out his own tablet, surprising several people who hadn't expected the old man to be tech-savvy, and connected it to the room's display system. If you don't mind, I'd like to present some findings. Sharon nodded slowly. Of course. Robert stood, leaning on his cane, and brought up his first slide. This is customer retention data across all Harrison's locations. A bar graph appeared with locations arranged from highest to lowest retention. The Maple Street location, the one you want to close or gut, has a 94% customer retention rate. That's the highest in the entire system by a significant margin. He let that sink in before continuing. The average converted location, 71%. Your top performing downtown location, 68%. Mitchell's jaw tightened. Retention isn't everything. Revenue per customer is what isn't everything. Robert's voice sharpened. Retention is the foundation of sustainable business. But let's look at your precious revenue metrics. He clicked to the next slide. Here's customer lifetime value, how much each customer is worth over their entire relationship with Harrison's. Maple Street customers average 4.3 visits per week. That's 223 visits per year. Even at lower prices, that's $1,116 per customer annually. Another click. Downtown location customers average 1.8 visits per week, or 94 visits annually. At higher prices, that's $1,034 per customer. Maple Street customers are worth 8% more over time, and they're far less expensive to retain because they're already loyal. Marcus was leaning forward now, genuinely interested. I hadn't seen it broken down that way. Because you're looking at quarterly reports, not long-term value, Robert said, but there's more. He brought up customer review data. Maple Street has a 4.9-star average across all review platforms. Your converted locations average 4.1 stars. Want to know what customers say? He didn't wait for an answer. Text snippets from reviews appeared on screen. This place feels like home. The staff actually remembers my name and my order. I was having the worst day and the manager just listened to me. Didn't try to upsell, just listened. They helped me when I had nothing. Now I'm successful and I come here every day to pay it forward. My daughter calls this the Kindness Café. She's learning that businesses can care about people. Robert swiped to reviews from converted locations. Nice but impersonal. Clean but cold. Overpriced for what you get. Feels like every other coffee chain now. What happened to Harrison's? Used to love this place. Not anymore. The room had gone very quiet. But let's talk about brand image. Robert continued, his voice gaining strength. You say the Maple Street location damages our brand. I say it is our brand, or was until you started erasing it. He clicked to historical data. When Eleanor and I founded this company, we had 3 core values: quality, affordability, and community. Every decision ran through those filters. We grew from 1 location to 43 because people trusted us. Not because we were trendy, because they trusted us. Sharon shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Harrison, with respect, the market has changed since. The market always changes. Human needs don't. Robert's voice was firm. People still need places where they belong, where they're seen as people, not transactions, where they can go when they're struggling and find kindness instead of judgment. He clicked to his next slide, and the room went silent. It was security camera footage from Christmas Eve. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m. The video began playing. No sound, but the images told the story clearly. The lights going out, candles being lit, Joyce moving through the darkness with purpose and grace, Betty distributing blankets, Tom with his guitar, customers sharing food with strangers, the homeless woman being welcomed inside, tears streaming down her face as Betty brought her hot chocolate. The whole cafe coming together, creating light in the darkness. Robert let the video play for 3 minutes before speaking. That, he said quietly, is what you want to eliminate. That sense of community, that kindness, that human connection. That's what you call off-brand. He turned from the screen to face the room directly. I call it the only thing that matters. Sharon was staring at the screen, her expression unreadable. Marcus looked thoughtful. Diana was wiping her eyes. Even Mitchell had lost some of his certainty. "This is actually remarkable," Sharon said softly. "It's sentimental," Mitchell argued, but his voice had less conviction now. "It's not a sustainable business model to give away products and services to people who can't pay. We have shareholders to consider, profit targets to meet." "Stop." The single word cut through the room like a blade. Robert's voice was quiet, but carried absolute authority. "Just stop. I've heard enough buzzwords in MBA jargon to last a lifetime. You want to talk about shareholders? Let me tell you about shareholders." He moved away from the screen, walking slowly around the table. 50 years ago, my wife Eleanor and I opened a small cafe with our life savings. Eleanor grew up poor, really poor. She knew what it felt like to be hungry, to be cold, to be looked at like you didn't matter because you didn't have money in your pocket. He paused behind Sharon's chair. "When we opened Harrison's, she had one rule: everyone gets treated like they matter. Everyone. The businessman in a suit, and the homeless veteran on the corner. The suburban mother and the struggling student. Everyone." He continued walking. She'd give free coffee to people who couldn't afford it. She'd let broke college students study for hours over a single cup of tea. She'd hire people no one else would hire. Ex-cons trying to rebuild their lives, addicts in recovery, single mothers who needed flexible schedules. He stopped at the window looking out over the city. "People thought we were crazy. They said we'd go bankrupt in 6 months. Our accountant begged us to charge more, to be more selective about who we served, to stop wasting money on charity cases." He turned back to face them. "We didn't go bankrupt. We thrived. Do you know why?" Silent. "Because Eleanor understood something that every MBA program in the world seems to have forgotten. People don't just buy coffee. They buy the feeling they get when they walk into a place. They buy belonging. They buy the knowledge that someone gives a damn about them as human beings, not just revenue streams." His voice grew stronger. "And once people feel that, they come back. Again and again. They bring their friends. They recommend you to strangers. They defend you when others criticize. They become loyal, truly loyal, not just 'we had a good quarter' loyal. They become part of your story." He pulled out a folder he'd brought with him and set it on the table. "I've been doing research over the past 2 months. Want to know something interesting? In markets where we've converted to the premium model, we've seen short-term profit spikes followed by steady customer decline. The curves are almost identical across all locations." Marcus reached for the folder, flipping through the data. His expression grew more serious with each page. "People try our renovated locations once, maybe twice," Robert continued. "Then they stop coming. Know why? Because they can get the same overpriced coffee at 50 other places. There's nothing special about us anymore. We're just another chain trying to be something we're not." He looked directly at Mitchell. "But that Maple Street Café, people drive across town to go there. They schedule their days around it. They celebrate birthdays there. They mourn losses there. It's woven into the fabric of that community. You can't buy that kind of loyalty with marketing campaigns or Instagram influencers. You earn it by giving a damn." "Mr. Harrison," Sharon said carefully, "I understand the emotional attachment, but we have growth targets, expansion plans, investor expectations." "You have 42 locations," Robert interrupted. 42. "And you're so obsessed with growing to 100 that you're willing to destroy the one location that actually exemplifies what this company was supposed to be." He moved back to his seat at the head of the table and sat down heavily. "Let me tell you all a story. 3 months ago, I went to that Maple Street Cafe on Christmas Eve. I hadn't been there in years. I was alone grieving my wife, feeling like the world had passed me by." His voice grew softer, more personal. "The power went out that night. Instead of closing, the staff lit candles. They made hot chocolate on a camping stove. They brought out blankets for customers. And when a homeless woman appeared at the door, cold and hungry, they didn't hesitate. They welcomed her in, fed her, made her feel human." He looked around the table. "I sat there and watched people share food with strangers, watched customers pay for meals for people they'd never met, watched a young employee play guitar, while everyone sang Christmas carols together. It was the most beautiful thing I'd seen since Eleanor died."
His eyes were wet now, and he didn't try to hide it. That night I remembered why we built this company. Not to maximize shareholder value or capture market share. We built it because Eleanor believed businesses should make the world better, not just richer. We built it because she wanted to create places where all people could feel like they belonged. He pulled out his phone and projected one more image onto the screen. A handwritten note on a napkin. Kindness never costs too much. Keep the lights on. I left that note for Joyce that night, Robert said. She kept it. And she's kept the lights on, literally and figuratively. While you've been chasing premium markets and higher margins, she's been building something that actually matters. Something that changes lives. Sharon was quiet for a long moment. Finally she spoke. What exactly are you proposing, Robert? I'm proposing we stop pretending we're Starbucks and start remembering we're Harrison's. I'm proposing we use the Maple Street model, not eliminate it. I'm proposing we implement community programs across all locations and actually measure their long-term impact on customer loyalty, brand strength, and yes, sustainable profitability. That would require a complete strategic pivot, Marcus said, but he didn't sound dismissive. He sounded intrigued. We'd have to retrain staff, redesign locations, change our entire marketing approach. Yes, it would. The board won't approve a reversal of the current strategy, Mitchell said. We've invested millions in renovations, in the new brand positioning. Shareholders expect. I'm taking back my proxy voting rights, Robert said quietly, and something in his tone made everyone freeze. For years I'd given the board full authority to act on my behalf, but that ended this morning. I still own 51% of this company. I just stopped letting others speak for me. I let you all run things because I thought you knew better, because I was tired, because I wanted to trust that my life's work was in good hands. He looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes. I was wrong to step back. I see that now. Eleanor would be ashamed of what we've become, what I've let us become. So here's what happens now.
He straightened in his chair, and despite his age, despite the cane leaning against the table, he looked formidable. I'm resuming active oversight of operations, not forever, I'm too old for that, but long enough to correct course. Sharon, you're talented and I respect your business acumen, but you're going to start listening to people who actually understand why Harrison's mattered in the first place. Sharon nodded slowly. I'm listening now. Tell me more, Charles. Robert turned to Mitchell. You're being transferred. I don't know where yet, but it'll be somewhere you can use your efficiency skills without destroying the soul of an operation. You're good at logistics and systems. Go do that somewhere else. Mitchell's face went red. You can't just I can and I am. I'm the majority shareholder. You report to me whether you like it or not. Mitchell stood abruptly. This is insane. You're throwing away years of work because of some sentimental. Sit down, Robert said, his voice like iron. I'm not finished. For a moment it seemed Mitchell might leave. Then slowly he sat back down, his jaw clenched. Joyce Martinez is being promoted to Director of Community Experience, Robert continued. She'll work with all locations to implement community programs similar to what she's built at Maple Street. Betty Williams will assist her. Tom Crawford will become assistant manager at Maple Street with a clear path to his own location within 2 years. You're basing our entire strategy on one location? Diana asked, not challenging but genuinely curious. I'm basing our strategy on what worked for 30 years before we forgot who we were. But I'm not asking you to take it on faith. I want a pilot program. He looked at Marcus. Choose 10 locations, 5 that are struggling after renovation, 5 that haven't been converted yet. Implement the community model there, give it 6 months, measure everything: retention, customer satisfaction, revenue, profitability, brand sentiment. If the numbers don't support it, we'll reconsider. Marcus was making notes. That's actually reasonable. We can control for variables, establish clear metrics, but I want the current leadership to visit these locations regularly, Robert added. Not to inspect, to participate. Work a shift, talk to customers, understand what we're actually building. Sharon leaned back in her chair, studying Robert with new respect. You've thought this through. I've had 2 months and 50 years to think about it. Robert's expression softened slightly. Sharon, I'm not trying to undermine you. You've grown this company significantly, but growth without purpose is just expansion. I want us to grow and matter. I believe we can do both. So do I, Sharon said, surprising everyone. I've been watching those review scores decline in renovated locations, reading comments about how we've lost our soul. I told myself it was the price of progress, but, she gestured to the frozen image of the Christmas Eve video still on screen. Maybe I was wrong. Mitchell made a disgusted sound. This is a mistake. You're all being manipulated by emotional appeals instead of looking at hard data. The data supports emotional appeals, Marcus interrupted, still reading through Robert's research. Customer lifetime value, retention rates, word-of-mouth referrals, it's all here. The Maple Street model actually performs better on long-term metrics. We've been optimizing for the wrong things. Mitchell pushed back from the table. I don't have to listen to this. I resign. Accepted, Robert said calmly. HR will be in touch about your severance package. Mitchell grabbed his things and stormed out. The door closed behind him with a heavy thunk. After a moment of awkward silence, Sharon spoke. That was going to happen eventually anyway. He's excellent at execution, but he's never understood culture. Who can replace him? Robert asked. I have someone in mind, Sharon said. Margaret O'Brien. She ran operations before we promoted her to strategic planning. She's been pushing back on the aggressive renovation schedule. I think she'd be perfect for this transition. The Margaret O'Brien who used to manage Maple Street, Robert asked. You know her? Joyce told me about her. She's the one who gave Joyce a chance when she needed it most. Robert smiled. Yes, bring her in. Diana raised her hand slightly. If we're pivoting strategy, marketing needs to change too. The crafted for those who know quality campaign was designed for the premium positioning. It won't work for a community-focused approach. What would you suggest? Robert asked. Diana thought for a moment. Something authentic, something that tells real stories. Maybe Harrison's Café, where everyone has a seat at the table, or where kindness is served daily, Robert suggested quietly. The room went silent. That's perfect, Sharon said softly. That's exactly what we should be. For the next 2 hours they worked through details. Which locations would be part of the pilot program? How to implement community programs without sacrificing profitability? Training approaches for staff, metrics for success, timeline for rollout. Robert participated actively, but he could feel his energy waning. He wasn't young anymore, and the confrontation with Mitchell had taken more out of him than he wanted to admit. Finally, Sharon called for a break. As people filed out for coffee, she stayed behind with Robert. That took courage, she said. Standing up to us like that. It took too long, Robert replied. I should have paid attention years ago. Why didn't you? He was quiet for a long moment. When Eleanor died, I lost my purpose. She was the heart of this company. I was just the businessman who made her dreams viable. Without her, he trailed off. I didn't care anymore. I let you all do whatever you wanted because I was too tired to fight. What changed? Christmas Eve. Seeing Joyce and her team keep that cafe open, welcoming people, creating community, it was like watching Eleanor's spirit alive in the world. I realized I'd failed her by walking away, so I came back. Sharon put her hand over his. I'm glad you did. I think we were losing our way. We were, but we can find it again. She smiled. With your help, I believe we can. Over the next 3 months, Harrison's Café underwent a transformation that was both radical and subtle, returning to its roots while adapting to modern realities. Joyce stepped into her new role with characteristic grace and determination. She traveled to the 10 pilot locations, spending days at each one, working alongside staff, training them in the community model, helping them understand that this wasn't just policy, it was philosophy. You're not just serving coffee, she told a staff meeting at the struggling downtown location. You're creating moments of connection. You're giving people a place to belong. That's what keeps them coming back. She instituted the Pay It Forward program at each location, the community boards, the food donation system for people and animals in need. She trained managers to look for the quiet person sitting alone, the customer who seemed to be struggling, the regular who suddenly stopped coming. Notice people, she said. That's the whole secret. Just notice people and treat them like they matter. Robert visited locations too, though less frequently due to his health. When he did appear, he didn't announce himself as the founder. He'd sit in a corner with his coffee, watching, observing, occasionally chatting with customers. At one location, a young barista complained to a coworker within Robert's earshot.
I don't see why we have to do all this extra stuff. The pay it forward thing, the community board, it's just more work. Robert waited until the barista's break, then approached him at his table. Mind if I sit? Sure, I guess. I overheard you talking about the new programs, Robert said. You think they're pointless? The young man, his name tag read Jake, shrugged. I mean, we're a coffee shop, not a charity. Why should we give stuff away for free? Let me ask you something, Robert said. Why did you take this job? Because I needed money, but you could work anywhere. Why here? Jake thought about it. I don't know, it's close to my apartment, I guess. Will you stay here, or will you leave for something better when it comes along? Probably leave, Jake admitted. It's just a job. Robert nodded. Now let me tell you about a young man named Tom, who works at our Maple Street location. He takes care of his sick mother, works 2 jobs, could barely afford groceries some weeks. He pulled out his phone and showed Jake a photo of Tom smiling behind the counter. The manager at that location noticed he was struggling. She started letting him take home the food that would otherwise be thrown away. Customers started adding extra to their tips, specifically for Tom. The community fund helped pay for his mother's medication once. Jake looked uncomfortable. That's nice, but Tom could work anywhere too. But he stays because that cafe gave a damn about him when he needed it. Now he works harder than any employee I've ever seen because he's not just working for a paycheck, he's working for a place that treated him like family. Robert leaned forward. The Pay It Forward program, the community board, they're not extra work, they're what transforms a job into something meaningful. They're what keeps customers loyal and employees engaged. They're what makes this place different from the 50 other coffee shops within a mile of here. He stood up, leaning on his cane. You can view this as just a job and leave in 6 months. Or you can understand that you're building something, a community, connections, moments that matter. Your choice. He walked away, leaving Jake staring after him. 2 weeks later, Robert heard that Jake had started a program at his location to collect winter coats for homeless individuals. Joyce reported that he'd become one of their most enthusiastic advocates for the community model. The pilot program's results started coming in after 3 months. Marcus presented them at a board meeting with barely contained excitement. Customer retention is up an average of 18% across all pilot locations. Customer satisfaction scores have increased by 22%. Social media sentiment has shifted dramatically. We're getting organic posts about kindness and community instead of just product photos. He clicked to the next slide. But here's what shocked me. Revenue is actually up 7% on average, despite the fact that we're giving away more free products and services. How is that possible? Asked one of the board members. Volume and loyalty, Marcus explained. More customers are coming in, and they're coming in more frequently. The lifetime value math Robert showed us was correct. A loyal customer who spends less per visit but visits constantly is worth more than a high-value customer who only comes occasionally. Sharon added, and our costs are down. Staff turnover has dropped by 35% in pilot locations. That saves us significantly in training and recruitment costs. What about the brand image concerns? Another board member asked. The fear that community programs would make us look cheap. Diana pulled up social media analytics. Actually, our brand perception has strengthened. We're being mentioned in articles about corporate social responsibility. We've been featured in local news segments. People are sharing stories about how Harrison's helped them. This is the kind of authentic marketing you can't buy. The vote to expand the community model to all locations was unanimous. Robert sat quietly through most of the meeting, occasionally offering guidance, but mostly letting the new generation of leadership run with the vision. He was pleased to see them not just accepting the community model but enhancing it, finding ways to make it even better. Sharon proposed a partnership with local schools to provide job training for at-risk youth. Marcus suggested a system for donating coffee and food to hospitals and fire stations. Diana developed a campaign highlighting real customer stories. They were making it their own, and that was exactly what Robert had hoped for. After the meeting, Sharon walked Robert to his car. "You're looking tired," she observed gently. "I am tired," Robert admitted, "but it's a good tired, like I've actually accomplished something." "You have. You saved this company." "No," Robert said. "I just reminded people what it was supposed to be. You're the one saving it now." Sharon hugged him, something she'd never done before. "Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for listening. 6 months after the board meeting, on a warm August evening, Robert sat at his usual table at the Maple Street Café. The place was packed, as it always was these days. Joyce slid into the seat across from him, setting down 2 cups of coffee. "Decaf for you," she said with a smile. "Doctor's orders. When did you start taking orders from my doctor?" Robert grumbled, but he was smiling too. "When your doctor called me to say you've been sneaking regular coffee behind his back." Robert laughed. "Traitor." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the life of the cafe unfold around them. At the counter, Tom was training 2 new employees, his patience and kindness evident in every interaction. Betty was chatting with a regular who'd just gotten engaged, exclaiming over the ring. Through the window, Robert could see the outdoor patio they'd added, full of customers enjoying the summer evening. "I have something to tell you," Robert said quietly. Joyce looked at him, and something in his tone made her smile fade. "What is it?" "I went to the doctor last week. The cancer has progressed faster than they expected." He held up a hand to forestall her protest. "It's okay, I'm not afraid. I'm actually ready." "Robert, listen. I need you to know something. These past 6 months have been a gift. Getting to see this place thrive again, watching you step into leadership, knowing that what Eleanor and I built is going to continue, it's everything I could have hoped for." Joyce's eyes filled with tears. "How long?" "Maybe 3 months, maybe less." He squeezed her hand. "But I want to spend as much of that time as I can right here, watching you all do what you do best. We're going to miss you so much." "I'll miss you too, but Joyce, you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll keep fighting. When it gets hard, and it will get hard, when people pressure you to prioritize profit over people again, when the world tries to make you believe kindness doesn't matter. Promise me you'll remember this, all of this." "I promise," Joyce said, tears streaming down her face. "I swear to you, Robert, we won't let it die. I know you won't." He smiled. "That's why I can let go." Robert Harrison died 3 months later, on a crisp November morning, with autumn leaves falling outside his window. The funeral was held at the original Harrison's Café location, the very first one he and Eleanor had opened 50 years ago. It had been renovated over the years but still retained its essential character. The turnout was so large that people spilled out onto the sidewalk, and speakers had to be set up outside. Employees came from every location, customers who'd been touched by Harrison's kindness over the years, business leaders who'd been inspired by the company's transformation, homeless individuals who'd been fed and welcomed, students who'd been given jobs when no one else would hire them. Joyce gave the eulogy, her voice strong despite her tears. "Robert once told me that Eleanor believed money was a tool, not a goal, that the goal was a better world." She looked out at the crowd. Robert lived that truth. He built a better world, 1 cup of coffee at a time, and more importantly, he taught us to do the same. He could have stayed retired, he could have let the company drift away from its values. But when he saw what we were becoming, he came back. At 78 years old, grieving his beloved wife, tired and sick, he came back and fought for what mattered. She held up a piece of paper, the note Robert had left on Christmas Eve. "Kindness never costs too much," he wrote. And then he spent his last months proving it. Proving that businesses can be profitable and compassionate, that success doesn't require sacrificing your soul, that the best way to build something that lasts is to build something that matters. She looked at the photo of Robert and Eleanor that sat beside the podium, young and smiling, standing in front of their first cafe. Robert and Eleanor started with a simple dream: create a place where everyone belongs, where everyone is seen, where everyone matters. Her voice broke slightly. "They succeeded beyond measure, and now it's our job, our privilege to carry that dream forward. So today we don't just mourn, we celebrate. We celebrate a life lived with purpose, a business built on compassion, a legacy that will continue to change lives for generations." To Robert she raised her cup of coffee. "Thank you for showing us the way." To Robert the crowd echoed, hundreds of voices united. The reception was held at the Maple Street location naturally. It was standing room only, with people overflowing into the street. The cafe provided food and drinks for everyone, free of course, because that's what Robert would have wanted. Stories were shared, tears were shed, laughter rang out as people remembered Robert's dry humor, his unexpected kindness, his fierce protection of what mattered. Sharon found Joyce standing at the window, watching the crowd with a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. "He'd love this," Sharon said softly. "He would," Joyce agreed. "All these people, all these connections. This is what he fought for." "I need to tell you something," Sharon said. "The board met yesterday. We want to establish the Eleanor and Robert Harrison Foundation, dedicated to helping other businesses implement community-focused models. We're funding it with 5% of company profits annually." Joyce turned to her, surprised. "That's incredible." "It's what he would have wanted, to spread the impact beyond just Harrison's." Sharon smiled. "We're also adding a new tagline to every Harrison's location. Want to guess what it is?" Joyce thought for a moment, then smiled through her tears. "Where kindness is served daily." "Exactly." Sharon put her arm around Joyce's shoulders. "He changed all of us, you know, made us better, made the company better." "He changed the world," Joyce said, "one cafe at a time." As the sun set over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, the lights of Harrison's Café glowed warm in the gathering darkness. Inside, people shared food and stories and comfort. Outside, a hand-painted sign had been mounted above the door: "Harrison's Café, where kindness is served daily." In memory of Eleanor and Robert Harrison, who showed us how to build something that matters, and in 1,000 small ways across the country, in cafes and businesses and organizations that had learned from Harrison's example, the revolution of compassion continued. Because Robert and Eleanor had proven something essential, that success without soul is hollow, that profit without purpose is meaningless, and that the truest measure of a life or a business is how many people feel more human because of it. The young woman pushed open the door of Harrison's Café, grateful to escape the cold November rain. She'd been walking for hours, job applications crumpled in her wet backpack, her last $3 in her pocket. The warm air and smell of coffee hit her like a physical embrace. She approached the counter hesitantly. Behind it, a young man in his late 20s smiled at her, genuine warmth, not the fake customer service kind. "What can I get you?" he asked. "Just, do you have anything for $3? $3 gets you a coffee." And he glanced at her soaked clothes, her tired eyes. "And you know what? It also gets you this sandwich. Somebody paid it forward earlier." "Really, really?" He handed her a wrapped sandwich and poured her coffee. "Find a seat anywhere. Stay as long as you want. We've got outlets if you need to charge your phone." As she found a table by the window, she noticed the chalkboard near the door. "Pay it forward, buy a coffee for someone who needs it." Below it hung dozens of paper cups. At the next table, an elderly woman was reading to a young child. Near the counter, a man in a business suit was deep in conversation with someone who appeared to be homeless. Not a dismissive conversation, but a real one. Two humans connecting. The young woman pulled out her damp job applications and tried to smooth them out. She'd been looking for work for 3 months. No one would hire her, not with her record, not with her history. The manager, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, approached her table. "I'm Joyce," she said. "I don't mean to pry, but are those job applications?" The young woman nodded, feeling defensive. "Is that a problem?" "Not at all. I just wondered, are you looking for work?" "Yeah." "Why?" Joyce pulled out a chair and sat down. "We're hiring, front counter, starting Monday if you're interested. Pay is $15 an hour plus tips, and we provide 1 meal per shift." The young woman stared at her. "You don't even know me." "No, but I know what it's like to need a chance." Joyce smiled. "Someone gave me one when I needed it most. Now I try to do the same." "I have to tell you something. I have a record. Petty theft, 3 years ago." Everyone says no when they hear that. "Everyone isn't here," Joyce said gently. "Here we believe people deserve second chances, third chances, as many chances as it takes." She stood up. "Think about it. If you're interested, come back tomorrow and we'll do a proper interview. For now, just enjoy your coffee." As Joyce walked away, the young woman felt something she hadn't felt in months: hope. She looked around the cafe, at the community board covered in hand-drawn flyers, at the pay it forward cups, at the photographs on the wall of smiling staff and customers, at a plaque that read, "In honor of Eleanor and Robert Harrison, who taught us that kindness is not a business expense. It's the best investment we can make." Outside, the rain continued to fall, cold and relentless. But inside Harrison's Café, where kindness was served daily, the lights stayed on. And somewhere in whatever place souls go when they leave this world, Robert and Eleanor Harrison smiled.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.